Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The lecture for today is on Islam and knowledge. And I will begin first with Islamic epistemology. Now, epistemology in Arabic, it is called Nazariyatul Ma'rifah, is a branch of philosophy dealing with the reality of knowledge, the theory of knowledge, involving such questions as what is knowledge, how is knowledge acquired, what do people know, how do we know what we know. In Western philosophy, many schools of thought have emerged with their own theories of knowledge, such as skepticism, idealism, realism, rationalism, empiricism, positivism, naturalism, and postmodernism. Islamic epistemology refers to the Islamic perspective on knowledge, the reality of knowledge, its sources, aims and objectives, types of knowledge, limits of knowledge, and the role of scholars or ulama. Now, the concept of knowledge in Islam. Knowledge is an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all knowledge originates from Allah as the all-knowing, Al-Alim. Allah's revelation, Wahi, represents the highest knowledge from which human beings come to know not only transcendent truths, but also all tangible realities in existence. The most important knowledge in Islam is the knowledge of God, His attributes, His names and His acts. As the most compassionate and merciful God, Allah has made it possible and most imperative that human beings acquire the knowledge from His revealed books, with the Quran as the final book, and from the cosmos that He has created, which contains His innumerable signs. Studying the Quran and studying the signs of God in nature and the cosmos by the use of the divine gift of the intellect, al-aql, are made obligatory for all Muslims in order to obtain the divinely revealed knowledge, from which Muslims obtain the necessary religious knowledge they need to lead their lives as His servants, and the empirically acquired knowledge from which they obtain knowledge of material and physical realities around them, which they need as His vicegerents of the earth. The people of knowledge, ulama, are highly esteemed in Islam because they are the inheritors of prophetic knowledge and wisdom. So are the scholars of worldly sciences, provided their methodology for acquiring the worldly sciences are based on aqidah of Tawheed, or the belief system in the uncompromising and absolute oneness of God and the worldview of the Quran. As both transmitted sciences, ulum naqliya, and intellectual sciences, ulum aqliya, are necessary to provide a comprehensive and integrated knowledge of religious truths and intellectual truths, Islamic educational institutions are required to integrate the two branches of knowledge in the curricula. With regard to the importance and complementarity of the two sources in Islamic epistemology, the late Professor Ismail al-Faruqi explains, and this is a quotation from his book, Islamization of Knowledge, General Principles and Work Plan. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed man with reason, which is a tool required to know the world around him, to utilize it in satisfying his needs and in shouldering his responsibilities as a vicegerent of God. On the other hand, divine revelation is meant to guide man towards knowledge of the aims of religious life, of the definition of its responsibilities, and of ascertaining its components. Revelation enlightens man, despite his limited mental powers, about metaphysical concepts. This is from the book which I mentioned just now, Islamization of Knowledge. Now I come to sources of knowledge. Knowledge, according to traditional Islamic epistemology and theology, consists of 4 sources. First, al-khabar as-sadiq, or true report. Second, al-aqal as-salim, sound intellect. And third, al-hawas al-khamsa, or 5 senses. And fourth, al-ilham, or spiritual intuition. It is interesting to note that contemporary thought in International Islamic Institute of Islamic Thought, that is IIIT, especially that of Sheikh Taha Jabir al-Alwani, has included the cosmos as a source of knowledge after divine revelation. Now, what is al-khabar as-sadiq? Al-khabar as-sadiq is the primary sources of knowledge consisting of the Quran, which provides the most authoritative, indispensable and indisputable knowledge and wisdom, and the authentic hadiths of the Prophet. So Quran and Sunnah constitute al-khabar as-sadiq. Then aqal salim. What is aqal salim? Islamic epistemology recognizes the importance of aqal as a source of knowledge which is rational, logical, and a priori. Human beings are charged with religious obligations by virtue of their having the sound reason. The soundness of aqal is an important condition because without it, reason can be influenced by emotions, imaginations, and speculative thought. Now, what is al-hawas al-khamsa, or the 5 senses? The 5 senses provide knowledge which is empirical. The tangible external data and information derived from vision, audition, gustation, touching, and sense of smell need to be guided and coordinated by reason to provide meaningful information. Then ilham. What is ilham? While secular Western epistemology rejects intuition as a source of knowledge, Islamic epistemology includes spiritual intuition or ilham as a source of knowledge because it is one means by which God communicates knowledge or true information directly to the spiritual heart or qalb of a human being by the process known as kashaf or unveiling. It is knowledge that God throws into the qalb without any effort on the part of the recipient. This intuitive knowledge is considered an important type and source of knowledge which is not available or achievable to all human beings. Now I come to the second part of my paper, that is the position of knowledge in Islamic civilization and definitions of knowledge. The preeminent position given to knowledge in the religion and civilization of Islam is well known among Muslim scholars, and many books have been written on this subject. The awareness of this fact among non-Muslim scholars is lacking, but one notable exception needs to be highlighted. Franz Rosenthal, 1914-2003, a professor of Semitic languages at the University of Yale from 1956 to 67, has to be credited with being the first non-Muslim scholar to have produced the most exhaustive study in English to date on the supreme importance of knowledge in Islamic religion and civilization. In his excellent work entitled Knowledge Triumphant, The Concept of Knowledge in Medieval Islam, 2007, Rosenthal observes that the Islamic civilization is one that is essentially characterized by knowledge or ilm. He writes in the introduction of his book the following, and I quote, "For ilm is one of those concepts that have dominated Islam and given Islamic civilization its distinctive shape and complexion. In fact, there is no other concept that has been operative as determinant of Muslim civilization in all its aspects to the same extent as ilm. This holds good even for the most powerful among the terms of Muslim religious life, such as, for instance, Tawheed, Ad-Din, and many others that are used constantly and emphatically. None of them equals ilm in depth of meaning and wide incidence of use. There is no branch of Muslim intellectual life, of Muslim religious and political life, and of the daily life of the average Muslim that remain untouched by the all-pervasive attitude towards knowledge as something of supreme value for Muslim being. Ilm is Islam, or knowledge is Islam, even if the theologians have been hesitant to accept the technical correctness of this equation. The very fact of their passionate discussion of the concept attests to its fundamental importance to Islam. In the concluding remarks of his book, Franz Rosenthal reiterates that, quote, Islamic civilization's insistence upon knowledge has no doubt made medieval Muslim civilization one of great scholarly and scientific productivity, and through it, Muslim civilization made its most lasting contributions to mankind, end of quote. Rosenthal affirms that there are two types of knowledge in Islamic civilization: divine knowledge and human knowledge. And his study shows that knowledge has several manifestations, as theology and religious sciences, as Sufism, as philosophy, and as education. In his chapter on definitions of knowledge, he has grouped the numerous definitions, more than 100 definitions, into the following maybe 12 categories. A, knowledge, the first category, knowledge is the process and identified with the knower and the known, or it is an attribute enabling the knower to know. Second category, B, and knowledge is cognition, knowledge is ma'rifah. And C, knowledge is a process of obtaining or finding through mental perception or idrak. And then D, knowledge is a process of clarification, assertion and decision, tabyin, ithbat and tamyiz. And then E, knowledge is a form, surah, a concept or meaning, ma'na, a process of mental formation and imagination, tasawwur or perception, and of mental verification, tasdeeq, a perception. F, knowledge is defined as belief. G, knowledge is defined as remembrance, imagination, an image, a vision, an opinion. H, knowledge is defined as emotion. I, knowledge is a relative term. J, knowledge may be defined in relation to motion. K, knowledge is conceived as negation of ignorance, adamul jahl. And finally, L, knowledge is the result of an intuition coming from outside or as a result of introspection. When we look at the book by Dr. Yusuf al-Qaradawi, he defines the word ilm according to the definition given by Al-Raghib al-Isfahani, who is an expert in Arabic language, in his well-known book Al-Mufradat fi Gharib al-Quran. So according to Raghib al-Isfahani, and Yusuf Qaradawi is using this definition, al-ilm is idraku shay bihaqiqatihi. Idraku shay bihaqiqatihi. That is to say, the perception of something as it really is. Okay, so then Sheikh Qaradawi in his book, and we will come to his book later on at the end of this my presentation, he says how no matter how the word is defined, because there's so many specialists and different branches of knowledge, each specialist would like to define it in his or her own way. He says we shall take the definition given by Imam al-Raghib, namely the perception of something with its reality, or the perception of something as it really is. Idrak الشيء بحقيقته. Every perception, exposition, and elucidation of that which is not known from any type and in any area, such that its reality is made as clear as possible to human beings, comes under the meaning of knowledge, ayn, that the Quran speaks of. So this is written by Sheikh Qaradawi in his book Al-Aql wal-Ilm fi al-Quran al-Kareem. Al-Qaradawi affirms several fundamental teachings of the Quran with regard to knowledge. For instance, he says that knowledge is basically of two kinds. There is knowledge of God, revealed as ayat in the recited books of Quran and Sunnah, and knowledge of His creation, revealed as His signs in the open book of the cosmos. Both knowledges are necessary for human beings to know but priority is given to divinely revealed knowledge because it reveals religious and transcendental truths and realities which cannot be known by human reason. And this is called fardu ayn knowledge. As for the second category, which is obtained from observing what is going on in the cosmos, this category of knowledge is called fardu kifaya knowledge. Al-Qaradawi says that the context, now there is a verse in the Quran, I have to quote it here because this is important. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ومن الناس والدواب والأنعام مختلف ألوانه كذلك إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء إن الله عزيز غفور. Sorry, I should begin from with أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. This is from Surah Fatir, verses 27 to 28. ألم تر أن الله أنزل من السماء ماء فأخرجنا به ثمرات مختلفا ألوانها ومن الجبال جدد بيض وحمر مختلف ألوانها وغرابيب سود ومن الناس والدواب والأنعام مختلف ألوانه كذلك إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء إن الله غفور رحيم. The translation is as follows. Do you not see that Allah sent down water from the sky with which we brought forth fruits of diverse hues? In the mountains there are white and red stones of diverse hues, and some are pitchy black, and human beings too. And beasts and cattle diverse are their hues. From among His servants is only those who know that fear Allah. Verily Allah is most mighty, most forgiving. If you look at the verse, it is clear from the words used in the verse that Allah is referring to physical phenomena in nature. And then Allah says that the most fearful of Allah among His servants are the scholars. Now, some Muslim commentators of the Quran say that the scholars referred to in this ayah are actually religious scholars. But this is disputed by Sheikh Qaradawi. So he says, Qaradawi says that the context of the verses means that the knowledge implied in the verses refers to scientific knowledge such as geology, astronomy, anthropology, physics, etc., not religious knowledge. The scholars who are being praised in this verse as having the quality of khashyatullah, or the awe and fear of the displeasure of Allah, are not religious scholars, but scientists with deep faith and God-fearing attitudes. All right. Now, without reducing the importance of mastering the worldly sciences, Al-Qaradawi has also emphasized the necessity of Muslim educated class and leaders to be adequately exposed to spiritual education, or tarbiyah ruhiyah, because many of them have become victims of moral and ethical corruption. Contemporary education and the sciences have also been seen to have given less importance to ethics and character education. In this regard, we feel it is important for Muslim intelligentsia and graduate students to be acquainted with Imam al-Ghazali's views on knowledge and men of knowledge due to the dearth of spiritual and ethical education in the higher learning institutions in the Muslim world today. We shall provide below some of the contents of the Book of Knowledge, the first chapter in Al-Ghazali's monumental work, Ihya Ulumuddin, which are pertinent to the above issues. It is in this regard that we feel that it is important for Muslim intelligentsia to be acquainted with Al-Ghazali's views on knowledge and men of knowledge, as he was one of the greatest theologians in Islam and in human history. So we shall provide below some of the salient points from his Book of Knowledge in his monumental magnum opus Ihya Ulumuddin. In the introduction to the English translation of the book, we have the words given by Dr. Hamza Yusuf, who is the president of Zaytuna College in California and who has studied Imam Ghazali's works in great depth. He says Imam al-Ghazali understood that knowledge is the starting point of any revival of the Islamic spirit. So he began his spiritual magnum opus, the Ihya, with a book of knowledge. However, he redefined knowledge as something deeper than simply rote memorization. So apparently during al-Ghazali's time, there were people who thought that knowledge meant just memorization. All of learning should be directed towards true knowledge, that is, knowledge of God. We also know in Islamic society, Islamic tradition, there is this saying, Awwaluddin ma'rifatullah. The first duty in knowledge, in religion, is to know God. So knowledge of God, either from his revealed books or from his book of nature, they should actually help human beings to arrive, first of all, at the knowledge of God, and then other things can follow. But what we find in the world today is human beings try to get all the knowledge about the universe minus the knowledge of God. So everything is turned upside down. Al-Ghazali's premise is that there are essentially two kinds of knowledge: practical knowledge, mu'amala, and spiritual knowledge, mukashafa. He makes it clear that his book, the Ihya, is solely about practical knowledge. Now we come to the virtue of knowledge. Fadila al-ilm. On the virtue of knowledge, learning and evidence founded on transmission and reason, Al-Ghazali gives the following quotations, first from the Quran and then from the sayings of the Prophet and also sayings of the companions. But I just select a few from the verses, from the many verses of the Quran and many hadiths and many reports from the companions. So I will just choose a few here because of the time constraint. There's in one surah, number 3, Ali Imran, verse 18, God says, that God witnesses that there is no deity except Him, and so do the angels and those of knowledge. So people of knowledge are grouped together with the angels. And then the Quran also says, and this he's referring to the earlier verse of Fatir, verse Surah Fatir, verse 28, from among His servants only those who fear God are those who have knowledge. Then he quoted, Al-Ghazali quoted from Ibn Abbas, a companion who said that the scholars are superior to the believers by 700 levels. Between each level is a journey of 500 years. So what Al-Ghazali is trying to tell us is that the position of the scholars is very, very high. The position comes second after the prophets. Al-Ghazali quotes many other verses of the Quran, relevant hadiths of the Prophet and traditions of the companions to indicate the high esteem given to knowledge and the exalted position given to people of knowledge above the ordinary believers. both the Quran and the Sunnah exhort mankind to the necessity of acquiring pure and accurate knowledge, not conjecture. By conjecture, the word used in the Quran is zan. For human beings to have the right values and attitudes to pursue the right way of living. Then I move on to, I skip this page and move on to 3.2, knowledge that is compulsory for each individual, that is fardu ayn knowledge, and knowledge that is a communal obligation of fardu kifaya. With regard to the first category, that is fardu ayn knowledge, Al-Ghazali stresses the necessity of knowing the pillars of the Islamic faith, the fundamental compulsory religious obligations or pillars of Islam, the knowledge of Islamic ethics or akhlaq, of what is allowed and what is prohibited, the halal and the haram, knowledge of the traits of praiseworthy character and blameworthy character, the knowledge of the diseases of the spiritual heart and the ways to overcome them. With regard to knowledge that is considered communal obligation of fardu kifaya, Al-Ghazali says, communal obligations include every form of knowledge that is indispensable to the establishment of the affairs of the world, and includes disciplines such as medicine, which is necessary for the preservation of healthy bodies, and mathematics, which is necessary for financial transactions and the division of wealth. So also foundational crafts such as agriculture, the manufacture of cloth, and governance, siyasa, even cupping. So there are many types of knowledge which come under communal obligations. Then Al-Ghazali stresses the necessity to be wary of blameworthy disciplines or blameworthy knowledge, and be searching for praiseworthy knowledge. For praiseworthy knowledge, he identifies 4 such categories. Number 1 is what he calls the usul, the fundamentals, namely the Quran, the Sunnah, Ijma', and the traditions of the Sahaba. And also the subsidiary branches of knowledge, which are innumerable and cover all those that bring good, public good, maslahah in this world, and that are beneficial in the hereafter. So that those then also the preliminary tools required for mastery of the fundamental disciplines. So these are what constitute the praiseworthy knowledge. Then Al-Ghazali clarifies that what we should be, what ordinary Muslims should be seeking for is this kind of knowledge, the praiseworthy knowledge and knowledge of practical, of use to improve oneself as a servant of Allah in performing one's duties to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and should try to avoid going into Gnostic knowledge or ilmul mukashafa, knowledge of unveiling, which is not meant for the general body of Muslims, but meant for the prophets and the saints and the special elects of God with those special qualities. Now, regarding the blameworthy qualities which Muslims have to avoid, and these qualities come under the diseases of the heart. So knowledge about the diseases of the heart is fardu ayn knowledge. It is obligatory upon everyone. And Al-Ghazali mentions many here. It takes half a page in Arabic to list all that. So I'm not going to, but it is, I have it in the text, but I'm not going to read it. These include fear of poverty, discontent with Allah's decrees, spitefulness and resentment, envy, dishonesty, ambition to high station, love of praise, love of longevity, to enjoy the mundane pleasures of this world, arrogance, ostentation, anger, conceit, enmity, hatred, acquisitiveness, avarice, passionate craving, loving of the world, and so on and so forth. Then Al-Ghazali gives some reasons why some knowledge is blameworthy. This concept of blameworthy and praiseworthy knowledge is very well known in Islamic civilization and culture, but in the modern world, they do not see this category as something useful, because to them, what is good, what is bad, varies from time to time, and so there is nothing absolutely blameworthy and absolutely praiseworthy. Things change, and therefore you can look for all kinds of knowledge you desire, and then society will decide whether it is good or bad, not God or religion. So knowledge, says Al-Ghazali, if knowledge constitutes the cognition of a thing according to its inherent nature, that is among the attributes of God, the Exalted. So it is not blameworthy. And he says that knowledge in and of itself is not blameworthy. It only becomes blameworthy or madhmoom in relation to the rights of the servants. And he also reminds the readers what the Prophet said, that we seek protection from knowledge that brings no benefit. Min ilmin la yanfa. And Al-Ghazali gives three reasons for this. The first is that it causes harm or darar in some manner or another, either to the one who pursues it or to the third party. The second reason is that in most cases it is directly detrimental to the one engaging in it. And the third reason is that immersion in a field in which the seeker is not firmly established. Then Al-Ghazali moves on to a very important aspect of learning in Islam and search for knowledge, and this is the issue of adab, the proper adab, the proper etiquette, the proper manners, the proper comportment, and the proper attitudes which the student and the teacher are required to have. So this is a very important part of Islamic epistemology, that is adab is crucial in the pursuit of knowledge for both students as well as lecturers. And this is very useful for contemporary education to restore. Al-Ghazali describes 10 responsibilities of the student. To give precedence to purifying his soul. I am giving you only just the beginning of the sentences, because you can read from the text. To diminish his ties with mundane occupations, not to conduct himself in an arrogant manner, not to leave a single aspect of the study of praiseworthy sciences or any branch of them without giving them careful consideration, to pursue in each field the best it has to offer, not to delve into all the various fields of knowledge all at once, to understand the manner in which the noble nature of the sciences is ascertained, and to understand the relationship of the sciences to the goals being sought. Then he also describes the functions of the teacher. And he says that the teacher is praised as a person of great worth by the heavenly bodies. He is like the sun that sheds light on others, being thus a light unto himself, or a whetstone that sharpens other things but cuts nothing, or a needle that clothes others but remains unclothed itself, or it is similar to the wick of a lamp that illumines for others while consuming itself in its own flame. In whatever manner one is engaged in instruction, he has taken on a momentous task of great consequences, so let him guard well his conduct and the role incumbent upon him. So what Al-Ghazali is trying to say is the choice that you make to become a teacher is a great choice, because you are actually like you're burning yourself to give light to others. So you are sacrificing your own pleasures for the enlightenment of other people. So it's a great value given to the duty of teaching. Then he lists 8 functions of the teacher. He says the first function of the teacher is benevolence towards his students. He should behave in such a manner that he treats them like his sons. Number 2, the second function is to follow the example of the master, that is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. The third function of the teacher is not to hold back anything from the guidance he provides his students. And the fourth function of the teacher, and among the most subtle of the art of teaching, is deterring the student from reprehensible conduct by way of intimation to whatever extent possible. So the teacher in Islam is not just someone who transfers knowledge, but someone who also tries to mold the character of the students and try to nurture the praiseworthy traits and control the development, the growth of reprehensible, blameworthy traits in the character of their students. The fifth function for the one responsible for certain sciences is not to criticize or disparage other fields of learning to his student. The seventh function of the teacher is to teach the poorly prepared student the clear and evident aspects of the sciences that befit him, and not to mention to him that which beyond this, that there are minutiae that he is keeping hidden from him. And the eighth function is to apply his knowledge. So the teacher is the one who practices what he preaches. In today's world, that is not necessarily a principle being followed by many teachers. Now we come to the what he calls the traits of scholars of the hereafter as compared to scholars of or reprehensible scholars. Scholars of the hereafter, he uses the term ulama al-akhirah, and reprehensible scholars, he used the term ulama as-su or ulama ad-dunya. Al-Ghazali says, in innumerable, this is a quotation from his book, in innumerable traditions dealing with reprehensible scholars, there are severe warnings making it evident that they will be the most severely chastised of the creation on the day of resurrection. It is of tremendous importance to realize the traits that separate the scholars of the world from the scholars of the hereafter. In fact, we should know that the Prophet said that the scholars are going to be among the most miserable on the Day of Judgment because they will be severely examined, and if they fail their duty as scholars, then they are going to face a bitter punishment in the hereafter. With regard to the traits of the scholars of the hereafter, these are the good scholars, Al-Ghazali says, among these traits are that they do not seek worldly gain through their knowledge. Among the traits of I'm now skipping many paragraphs. Among the traits of a scholar of the hereafter is that he is steadfast in giving everything to strengthen his certitude or yaqeen. Certitude is very important in Al-Ghazali's epistemology. So you have to you have to make sure that what the knowledge that you are going to pursue is going to be to lead you to certitude and not to doubt or to something that is not clear, something vague and uncertain. So, because to him, certitude is the foundational principle of religion. Yaqeen is the Prophet said, yaqeen is the totality of iman is achievement of yaqeen or certitude. All right, then Al-Ghazali concludes this part by saying, in summary, the majority of mankind only incline towards the easiest things and that which accords best with their natural dispositions. Verily, the truth is bitter, being resolute in it is arduous, comprehending it is demanding, its path is not well traveled, for all that is an unending source of agony for the spirit. We seek protection with God from the pretext of Satan, from which the multitudes have already perished, and we ask God, the Exalted, to place us among those who have not been led astray by the life of this world and who have not been deceived by the deceiver. Now I come to one of the last part in his book is the intellect and the noble nature of the intellect. The last chapter of Al-Ghazali's book of knowledge is devoted to the elucidation on the noble character or noble nature of the intellect. Al-Ghazali says, the intellect is the source of knowledge, its point of origin and its foundation. Knowledge springs from it like fruit from a tree, light from the sun and vision from the eye. How could that which is the means to well-being in this world and the hereafter not be of noble character? The noble nature of the intellect is self-evident. God the Exalted has called it light or nur, and when he mentions light and darkness, he intends in it knowledge and ignorance, and as in his saying, he brings them out from darkness into light. In conclusion, the intellect, despite a variety of definitions given to it, is understood by Al-Ghazali as a fundamental spiritual faculty in man, which is innately obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the creator of the intellect, because it is infused with iman. The intellect in Islam has to be linked to iman, has to be based on iman, of faith. Its function is to complement divine revelation, not to challenge it, not to reject divine revelation, but to support it and to guide human beings to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to guide human beings to reject Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the reason why the Quran praises highly what is called ulul albab, that is possessors of sound intellect, and also the ulama who have the quality of khashyatullah. It is important to remember that this faithful and God-obedient nature of the intellect and the God-fearing scholars of in the worldview of the Quran, because in the modern worldviews and in contemporary secular civilization, the intellect has been completely detached from its spiritual and transcendental root, completely uprooted from the sacred transcendent soil from which intellect grows. In fact, the intellect of modernism and postmodernism has been enthroned as the new deity which replaced the one true God. We should be grateful to Imam al-Ghazali and scholars like him who have bequeathed to the present generation an epistemology that integrates the intellect with faith and revelation, iman and wahi. So you have, these are the three very important aspects of Islamic epistemology. That first is revelation, yeah. Then you have the intellect, and then you have human experience. In these three aspects, at least in the aspect of human experience and reason, we have a common ground with modern worldview. But the great difference is that the modern worldview rejects revelation as the highest knowledge and the source of knowledge. So we have to be grateful that Al-Ghazali, in his integrated epistemology, brings together reason and revelation, and also this ad-dunya and al-akhirah, and also the spirit and the material world together. And this methodology of integrated epistemology is one way to overcome the crisis in today's, the crisis of knowledge and the intellect in today's world. The last thing I like to mention here is taken from Dr. Yusuf al-Qaradawi's book, Al-Aql wal-Ilm fi al-Quran al-Karim. That is the formation of the scientific mindset of the Quran, what he calls al-aqliyya al-ilmiyya. So he mentions the following as some of the most important criteria for the formation of the mentality, the scientific mentality that the Quran wants human beings to have, and certainly the Muslims should have this. Unfortunately, not many Muslims seem to care about the scientific mentality because they, in their study of the Quran, they have forgotten this dimension. But we thank Al-Qaradawi for bringing it up. Space does not allow me to reproduce all the relevant arguments and verses of the Quran which Qaradawi uses, but suffice it to mention that he has presented 7 general principles to support the claim that the Quran really is encouraging Muslims to have the aqliyya ilmiyya, or the mentality, the mindset, the attitude of rationality, rational thinking. So number 1, he says, is the rejection of conjecture. This is all based in the Quran. Yeah? These 7 principles are derived from the Quran. First is rejection of conjecture, opinion, surmise, speculation, which come under the term zan. So rejection of zan in every matter, rafdul zan, which requires conviction or convincing evidences. For instance, when discussing issues regarding the existence of God, it is unacceptable to support such creeds on the basis of zan. Number 2, absence of compliance with desires or emotions. اتباع الأهواء والعواطف in matters of knowledge or science. Then number 3, rejection of blind imitation, التقليد الأعمى, or absolute submission to what the ancestors and predecessors had established. Number 4, rejection of subordination or blind following to the tyrants, overlords, powerful elites and the nobilities in the communities. Number 5, to subject oneself to intellectual observation, التعبد بالنظر العقلي, using intellectual observation to understand oneself, to understand the universe, nature and so on. Then number 6, unacceptance of any claim or contention not supported by evidence. لا تقبل دعوة بغير برهان. Evidence should be in the form of sense perception, historical evidence, rational evidence or scripture evidence. And number 7, paying attention to the laws or conventions of Allah in the cosmos and in human society. رعاية سنن الله في الكون والمجتمع. So respect for the laws or conventions which Allah has established is one of the pillars of scientific mindset. Then Al-Qaradawi also quotes the view of Dr. Hafiz Hilmi, a biological scientist who appealed many years ago to the Muslim natural scientists. He says, ما هو مطلوب من علماء الكون المؤمنين? What is required of scientists of the cosmos who are believers? He wanted them to present their scientific discoveries to the world community as manifestations of their iman and not merely as scientific facts. And to do that, they need to understand the Quran, the works of Quranic exegetes, and the scientific legacy of Islamic civilizations. And finally, it will be of interest I have given the names of several Western scientists who embrace Islam after studying the Quran objectively. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.